Welcome back to Borderlines. Wasn't that a most interesting, informative, and educative conversation with my guest, Seamus Mafakalezi? I think I pronounced it right. The Iranian United States citizen. So, in all of this, since Israel attacked Iran, we had Ori Goldberg here last week, and Ori Goldberg was very clear. He said, and Ori Goldberg is from Israel, he's a Jew, he lives in Tel Aviv. For those of you who keep asking, why haven't you had an Israeli guest in? We've had the Israeli ambassador many times. We've had Rabbi, the chief rabbi of Lagos. We've had the rabbi of the settlers in the West Bank. We've had Ilan Pape. We've had Miko Peled, and the list goes on and on and on, and all those additions are available on YouTube. But let me bring us back to right now. Ori Goldberg said, this is a distraction from Gaza. That was a reminder for all of us, to all of us, not to forget that whilst Israel is now head-on fighting Iran, there is still a genocide. There is still daily killings. There is still starvation and the weaponization of food. There is still destruction, mass destruction, going on in Gaza and the West Bank. There is still apartheid going on in Jerusalem and the West Bank. So with me today, I have a wonderful guest. As you all know, I do love art. So we're going to be asking, what does it mean to be a creative under occupation? How is creativity a form of resistance? And what does it do to self? Because when all is said and done, like I said, whilst all of this is going on, we must not forget Gaza, or indeed the Palestinian struggle. So with me, my guest today is, I've got to pronounce your name right, Rania Odaymat. Did I correct it?
Rania Odaymat.
Odaymat. Welcome to Nigeria, Lagos, digitally, as we say, on Borderlines.
Thank you. I'm very excited, about Nigeria. We're next door neighbors, and I've never done anything with Nigeria. So, yeah, this is cool.
I mean, what's even more interesting about you, and I'm glad you mentioned, is that you're what? You're half Lebanese and half Ghanaian, right?
So I am, yes. But I mean, it's very difficult to really answer, right? Because definitely I have the Lebanese part. But when my ancestors came, Lebanon didn't exist.
Ah, okay.
So it was the Damascus Protectorate under Ottoman Empire, and Ghana was still the Gold Coast at the time. And actually, my grandfather was part of the independence movement. He was appointed by Nkrumah as the first speaker for Ghana at the UN. So he was very much part, that is what I was raised on, yeah.
So you've had the blessing, and I will call it a blessing, of having revolutionaries around you, discussing around you, and even if you didn't understand
the blessing
as a
and
child,
the curse.
Is it really a curse though? I mean, it's something to carry.
No, yes.
It's a burden, but it depends on how you carry it, right?
Yes, that's true. But then you need to do a lot of growth, a lot of unlearning and relearning to be able to carry that, right? Because so much, again, like what we're seeing in mainstream media, what we're seeing when it comes to freedom of expression and all of that, so much is against you carrying that, right? And so something that, as you said, is so great, and it is an honor and a privilege to be able to carry that, right? But then so many times when you're not strong enough in the beginning, it can feel like a curse, actually. Yeah. And until you outgrow that. And
a quote of yours is, to produce art in the face of annihilation is a refusal to disappear. given what's going on in Gaza right now that we've seen in the last 20 months, 180 artists and cultural workers been killed. We've seen scholaticide, genocide, culturicide.
Yeah.
You know, the existence of a people, the monuments of a people, libraries that carry the stories of a people have been destroyed. You know, talk to us about the resistance, how you resist such intentional, desecration.
I think you resist it very imperfectly. You're constantly thinking on your toes, trying to dig deep into your knowledge, trying to learn even more, trying to make the best out of the tools that you have, because most art, like let's say galleries or commercial galleries, are definitely not going to invite you to do that work. So you have to do it on your own, or impose it, or do it in platforms. So, for example, I remember months ago, earlier in the year, there was a really well-known gallery here in Accra, which was doing an exhibition, a very big group show titled The African Family. And I got to know, because I'm very good friends with a lot of the artists who were there, and others, and I'm really part of the art circuit. And so I found it very strange that we can be talking about the African family, but the arts can be so tone deaf, right? Because none of the issues that affect the African family, whether it has to do with South Africa, whether it has to do with Congo, whether it has to do with Sudan, whether it has to do with Palestine and how it affects us all, right? And also the links between all of these conflicts together. And so I decide to do a live performance, to be a live performance myself. I made a huge skirt, where I said, sorry for using the bad language, but I'm repeating what I wrote on it. Is something to do with fuck your supremacy, fuck your whatever, and fuck your vision of our human family. And then I had a big thing where I kept saying free Palestine. And I went there prepared, because by that time we had the protests in Accra, the Palestine protests in Accra had been banned. And so I'm like, no, I'm just going to make an art work out of it. So I go there and I'm expecting to be kicked out of the gallery, to get into trouble, etc. So that's also, you have to arm yourself, intellectually and emotionally. But then the exact opposite happened. I went there and it was very disruptive, because I kept like this loud voice, like the loudspeaker kept free Palestine, and one family. I kept saying one family. And I was really, really, really shocked, because the people who came to the exhibition, the exhibiting artists, guests, the staff who worked there, the waiters, the people who worked in the shops, the number of people who came to support and to say, thank you for doing this, or to ask questions, or to share their helplessness or their feelings. And I realized one thing with a lot of people, something that kept coming back again and again. It was that people felt that, so many of them told me, I'm too small, I can't make a difference. And I'm like, I'm a small fry, relatively speaking, but a beach is made out of grains. When enough of us, nobody is insignificant. We've been conditioned to believe we are insignificant. So doing things like that, doing things AI is questionable, right? But it allows me to send the message out there to sort of think around the restricting, algorithm and how it continues to shape. It's you don't need a gallery to be able to do that, and so it has its advantages, making some works by hand, also having conversations, and yes, allowing myself to make mistakes and allowing myself to know that my process when it comes to this, because like I've received death threats, I've received rape threats. That's
If I
on
may
the
just,
public platform.
wow, if I may just
And in
ask,
private,
who from? Death
yes.
threats from whom and rape threats from whom?
I mean, basically from what I could say, whether it was in the private DMs and I took screenshots of that, or on my public page, from Zionists or from Jewish Zionists or Israelis, mainly. Like, and the funny thing, which I reflected a lot on, was that I'm using my own creative expression. I'm creating art to share a message, right? And which is within my job as an artist. But then, and I'm being shadow banned and I'm being punished, on the platform and all of that. Whereas these people who are actually, like, one person said they were going to rape me with a telephone pole. None of these people, whether it's in private messages or on my platform, that's with the earlier, my earlier posts, none of them were mediated. None of them were shadow banned. None of them were given warnings. None of them were, and it makes you think, like, sometimes what kind of reality are we living in?
Absolutely.
Where, no matter what my art, I try to be, I'm always respectful, and I'm thinking about being creating from a place of consciousness, whereas that type of behavior is tolerated and actually encouraged, whereas we are being persecuted in a way, and also, having our freedoms taken away, basically, to a big extent.
Indeed. And it's really, I'm so sorry about that. It's really quite harrowing to hear that, all because of art, and you received such threats. Did you report these handles? These accounts?
I didn't bother to, because I was aware from a lot of other platforms that I follow, and from some art organizations, that this was happening, and it was becoming very common, and it was happening to very big global artists even. And I had to make a choice. Do I use the energy that I have to fight that? I took screenshots, and I have the proof, but I didn't report, because from what I understood, 70 to 90% of the time, your reports are completely disregarded. And I didn't want to use my energy. And also, when you report, you attract even more attention and opposition, then you become even more problematic. So it was a question about, do I want to use my energy to do something that ultimately, has a very, very, very little chance, or almost no chance of working? Or do I want to preserve my energy and use it to heal, to grow, to do the work, to reach out to other people who need the support? And so I made that choice. And, it was the right one for me. But I mean, different people at this time choose different things. And I think we need it all, right? There's no like one size fits all that works for everybody.
Tell us, what's the sort of coalition like in Ghana with regards to, speaking up against what we're seeing in Gaza, the genocide we're seeing in Gaza, indeed where does the Ghanaian government stand in relation to what's going on as well as the people?
Yeah. So it's with the new government, our new president has been different about it. I know, like with the previous government, right? When the protests, because after the genocide started in Gaza, there were protests over here. But then at some point, the government banned them, and people were threatened with imprisonment or all sorts of things.
Was that a general ban on protest, or just protest pro-Palestine or anti-Israel protest?
No, that's what I was about to say. So to be honest, it wasn't just for Palestine. We, at that time, there were protests for Galamsey, and we were doing, there was a huge group of us, like we called ourselves Artists United, for safe water. And I'm sure you heard about all the Galamsey protests and the people who were jailed, the people without due process. So it was a descent into fascism or this global insane direction. Like it felt that, yeah. So even I'm very good friends. Like I have a creative family, a whole community that we go. Some of us go. Like some of our like family members. We've worked a lot over the years together, and some. Like it didn't matter whether you had journalistic immunity or whether you had all the permits or you were doing your work as an artist by the law. Like, it didn't matter at the time. So we're not seeing that right now. But then it is still, and also, I mean, there's signs that, for example, the letter in The Guardian that the article, I don't know whether you saw it, of our president's Mahama, following Cyril Ramaphosa's meeting in the White House with Donald Trump. And he made there was an amazing article basically pushing back against that, speaking out against that, right? But also alluding to the genocide, the real genocide that is happening, without mentioning Gaza, but it was very, very like clear and honest. So I have a feeling, like, have there been any protests? No. And it's afterwards, it's a little bit complicated, right? Because the country is very tired, honestly. Like it's not an easy time for anyone, I think, especially, and there are artists who are doing something, speaking out, working together. But then I think there is, when it comes to the general public, it's very, very mixed. I don't know. And why it's mixed, the only reason is because of the Zionist Christian Church, which takes most of its funding from the US, from the Zionist Church in the US. So I've had friends, artists, acquaintances show me, for example, trails on WhatsApp of comments or film or things, conversations that were happening in church. And there is a lot of sort of, you need to respect your pastor, and the message that is being sent is that if this has to happen for the second coming of Christ. And a lot of people don't agree with that, and they're very angry about that, but they're scared of not belonging to the church or being kicked out or being seen as problematic. And they're scared also of being wrong against, like, who am I to say if the second coming is now or it's not now?
Yes.
But then you do have a lot of Christians, some in church, some like who have completely, like, who don't agree and who have had problems with the church, or other Christian communities like the Catholics, or other who don't are not allied or depend on the funding from the U.S., who are speaking out and saying, no, 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 this is not a virgin, and you can't burn children in the name of Christ, and this is not what Christianity is all about.
Yeah.
This is and trying to explain to others that this is basically a colonial kind of Christianity, which has always been used to as a weapon, to subjugate people. And so, yes, but then, so it's mixed in a way. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, no, it gives us an idea. It certainly gives us an insight into what's going on. And I'm glad you mentioned, the water protest, because you had the likes of Bozama St. John, who is very popular, but who hasn't said anything about what's going on, with regards, to the water protest, etc. And, but that's a topic for another day. So let's talk about Palestinian pain and the global art economy. Edward Said once warned of the museumification of Arab identity, where culture becomes a curated relic, palatable for Western consumption. Do you believe the global art world today commodifies Palestinian pain for liberal approval? And if so, how do Palestinian artists reclaim the terms of engagement? Indeed, as an extension to that, what we have seen is, awards being given to Palestinian journalists. Most of them have been killed. They don't speak, but they give them awards. And you start to question, are you giving an award to the ghost? Are you trying to pass this guilt onto those who are still able to, maneuver and navigate their way through this whole, awful existence? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, are you trying to buy their consent?
Exactly.
Because, I mean, you're mentioning something. But one thing I would like to say is that I'm not Palestinian, right? So anything I'm saying is, as an artist, yes, I have Arab roots. I have mixed from all of these, these areas. But I was raised in Accra. Home is Accra, right? So any opinion that I'm giving is not a first-hand opinion as somebody who grew up in Palestine and who knows what it means to be Palestinian. But my observation, for whatever it's worth, is that so often, look at the faces of these Palestinians. For example, Motaz Aziza, or there was a writer the other day, or Bisan when she was given the award, the Peabody Award, right? And
Motaz, who still goes through a lot of pain.
Yes.
It's so obvious.
Yes. And do they look happy to you to receive the awards? You can see on their body language, right, that they understand all of that. They don't want to refuse the award because the hope is any attention, I think, is possibly could be used to spread the message even wider, and to get people. But then again, you see on their body language and faces that accepting this award is a kind of violence in a way also, because they're doing it, they're being picked out, of everybody like them. In a way, it's trying to, as you said, to sensationalize that, which we've seen, right, in the genocide for entertainment videos done by Israelis, which is, it's beyond, despicable. I don't know how to describe that trend. I don't know how to process it even, right? And that spectacle, right? You can see all of that like going through their minds. Some of them allude to it. Some of them have mentioned some parts of it, right? And they know it's a lot of pain. It piles on the guilt, as you said. It sensationalizes something without actually addressing the core issue. So it's very, very like superficial, a kind of recognition while you're dehumanizing, but it doesn't affect the dehumanization that continues to happen, right? And so in a way, it feels just empty or performative.
Indeed.
That's the word I was used, right? It's performative. We're ticking a box. We're showing that we're trying to show ourselves in a certain light when the reality, the everyday reality is belying you. Your actions are belying actually these little gestures that you're doing. But a lot of other Palestinian artists, and as I said, like all of us artists who are doing work, you know, to talk about that, are being punished. You know, so what does it really mean? What does it really say to you when, you know, a few are being picked and a few who are going through hell and whose families are going through hell, right? And to be given these awards, but you're still trying to shut off and shut out, you know, everybody else.
Let's talk about, of course, you're literally our brother across the, just 45 minutes flight away to Ghana. How important is it for those of us in Africa, if not the global South in general, to be in solidarity, not symbolic solidarity, but active solidarity with Palestinians, especially in terms of colonialism and our history of colonialism, and the fact that black bodies, and especially black women's bodies, are seen as a places to abuse and, with impunity and get away with it?
I think we don't have a choice. We don't have a constructive choice but to be in solidarity, because I was friends years ago with an expert in governance. He had come to Ghana and he was sent to do a project. He was hired to do a project here. He was Canadian and he was really like an expert in governance. And so we became very good friends and we started having a meeting every week to discuss world affairs. And one thing he taught me, and I was interested in that because, again, the way I was raised, my education, my background is in translation and interpretation. So he taught me one thing, one very, very important thing. Rania, when in doubt, follow the money trail. And so if we follow the money trail, in the case of us as Africa or the African continent, if we follow the money trail, we'll see that Palestine is very much connected to South Africa, is very much connected to what's happening in Sudan, is very much connected to what's happening in the Congo. Actually, the system and the money trails are all interconnected. It's the same system of colonization, modern day, what we call modern day enslavement. I don't know what to describe what is happening in Congo. I do know that top of the mind, I always, from President Nkrumah, that watch out for what happens in the Congo because it will always destabilize the continent, right? If we look at how Rwanda is being used to actually use, and who are the key players, where is the money coming from? They're all the same players. I think Palestine is the extreme case, the litmus, test, because it's occupied Fili, you know what I'm saying? It's very clear, like that. It's Fili is like we say in Ghana, like you can see it with your own eyes, you know. It's an apartheid state, you know. It's obviously an apartheid state, etc., etc. So, and it's the most extreme case, but I don't even know whether it's extreme. It's very extreme in some aspects, but then again, we are being, what is happening in so many African countries like Congo and Sudan is not allowed, is not discussed is being blacked out on mainstream media as well. I look at also as an artist, you know, you're trained to look at patterns and not individual like details or events. You know, you zone in on a detail, but then you try and look at patterns, right? And if we look at the patterns of divide and rule, if we look at the patterns of what is happening in the continent, if we look at patterns, it's the same playbook basically that is being used in the Middle East and in Africa. It's the same playbook. And as long as we cannot, you know, debunk that playbook, as long as we cannot look at coming together, creating communities, discussing these things, having the difficult conversations, right? Creating allyship, creating collaborations, looking at it as something that concerns us all, because it does.
Indeed, it does.
Like whether it's interference with government, the aid. Look, Gaza is the extreme case where you see aid used as a weapon of war, right? And it's, again, I mean, I was on a platform where they were comparing it to satanic, you know, practices and whatever. And two satanic worshippers actually came to the platform to say, I was crying and laughing at the same time, to say that they don't have anything to do with this. They don't support this kind of action. They don't support the actions of Israel, that this is not what Satanism is about. And so even they were offended to be compared to what is happening, you know? And to me was like, this playbook, right? It's being used in Latin America and El Salvador, for example, to one degree or another. The extreme is happening in Palestine right now, but it's happening all around to us, the global South. I don't like that word, you know, because what does global South mean? Like, you know, and the global South is the majority of humanity. And what does it say for us? Are we going to go back? Like, because when we look at the situation of Ghana, for example, with what's happening with the Galamsey and the pollution of 60% of the body of waters, when we were, you know, when we started, for me, we sat together with think tanks, so artists, scientists, whatever, together. And I have friends, like some of them brothers, who have, as documentary journalists and photographers, whatever, have documented it over the years, right? The process. And we're like, damn, this is how Congo got to where it is. And there's a certain point where if you don't stop, the slide is very sharp, and then it's hell, and you cannot get out of it. So why are we all hostages? Why do we allow ourselves to continue to be hostages to a system that constantly dehumanizes us? Can you sleep? Like in Gaza, what is happening in Gaza is basically, now they're saying we've completely changed the rule of war. We don't even have to pretend. It's in your face, this kind of sadism, and you have no choice. You have to keep quiet to that. Is this something that we're willing to put our children and our children's children through? Because if now this becomes a custom for the mighty, you know, that's what
might is right.
What is it?
Yes,
might is right.
Yeah,
at whatever cost.
At what cost?
There is, you know, there is nothing that is sacred.
Yeah.
You don't have any humanity. There is no dignity, let alone opportunity, you know? Is it sustainable for us? Like, is this something that we can do anything of we can have any hope, you know, that can lead to anything good?
Indeed. Very,
Potentially.
very, very good question. I think one of the things that's happened as a result of the last 20 months is, where, irrespective of what side you're on, many are questioning their humanity, their existence in itself. One of the things that we've seen America, you know, basically pushing back, or should I say criminalizing protest, student protest, something that the likes of Harvard, you know, are known for. The built universities are the place where consciousness is built and shaped and read and rewritten and reshaped. And then you have spaces like the Barbican, Sydney Festival, and the Berlin Volksbühne, you know, who have also come under, you know, under fire for cancelling pro-Palestinian artists or Palestinian artists in general. Is it an obligation? And this is putting you on the spot. Is it an obligation for artists to actually resist what's going on in their work and show that resistance in their work or even in their language? Is it an obligation?
No, I don't believe in obliging anybody to do anything. You know, I don't, because again, two rights don't make a wrong. It's not my role or anybody's role or right to take away somebody else's right. And we've suffered a lot from that. We are triggered a lot by that, right? But also, I think it's an issue of awareness. For me, it's very important, because if you have a platform and you're not using it, you know, to shed light, at this point, when it comes to issues of genocide, when it comes to issues of, you know, settler colonialism and all of that, if you're not part of the solution, then I'm sorry, you're part of the problem, because your silence is deafening, because it's very clear that, and it makes me question, okay, are you really an artist, or are you a cultural worker and a servant to a specific system, economic system, you know? Because and that system, that economic system, is at odds. It's damaging to our well-being, to our cultural and long-term economic interests and growth, you know. And that system is interested in hiring you as an employee or as a propagandist, but they're not really interested in a real artist or critical thinkers or creative problem solvers or healers or bridge builders, which is all falls within the purview of art. You know, one thing that has guided my creative journey was the firm belief. My mentor, Miss Angela Christian, who was like a grandma to me, and she was chief of protocol during Nkrumah's time. She never got married or had kids, but she and my mom had a mother-daughter sort of relationship. And she was one of the first curators and creative facilitators on the continent. And she kept telling me, as did my grandfather from, you know, that Nkrumah always said, there can be no long-term practice of our freedom and independence without a solid investment in the arts. Because the arts would allow us to introspect. It would allow us to disrupt. It would allow us to take ownership of our stories. It would allow us to take ownership of our mistakes. It would allow us, like so many things that art can do, right? And of course, and so from from that perspective, we can't really afford to do art for art's sake. Now, I'm not saying that, you shouldn't do it a little bit, or, that's a privilege, right? Or to sustain yourself, or just for the joy of creating something. Because again, that, sustaining yourself, recharging yourself, can be also a radical act of resistance, right? But it cannot be all that you do. Like some of the people I respect the most and who are close to me in my community are people like Leslie Loco, for example, who is, she did the Laboratory of the Future at the Venice Biennale of Architecture. She was the curator of the Venice Biennale of Architecture. And she's also an educator. She's constantly thinking about what is the future of education in Africa, and doing now the nomadic workshop, like the nomadic studios. People like Poetra Asantewa, who's also a dear friend and a sister, who's an amazing artist and creative writer as well, but she's working on so many projects like Black Girls Glow, for example, that gives platforms to young Ghanaian women, or also, people like Neo Bodai, who's like a brother to me, the founder of Nuku Studio, what it is to be critical as a photographer, to be a critical thinker. So all of these, if you're not doing any of that, all you're doing is producing for foreign, like commercial galleries, then yes, my opinion, like I question your consciousness. I question, whether you're truly an artist or whether you're driven by something else, maybe profit or visibility. And I'm not against profit or visibility, right? But if we don't do the work, then who?
Who does? Thank you. I think, I'll open up the lines. You can call me now, 0201 277 0993, 0201 4657190. Send your messages or questions to WhatsApp on 0809 597 5805. There's something that happened recently, and I think this is also a conflict. Is where a lot of people find themselves conflicting. So, Dr. Tunde Abidemi Babalola won the Dan David Prize. Now, the Dan David Prize is quite prestigious rather. He researched into, it's a science prize, and if I read the citation, it says, the citation on Babalola by the awarding body reads in part, Babalola has used material science to uncover the history of technology development in modern West Africa. Okay, his research showed that glass production in Africa predated European colonialism and was developed independently. Well, here's where the conflict comes in. The Dan David Prize is given by the Dan David Foundation, which is headquartered in Tel Aviv University. How does one, sort of manage that sort of conflict? Because of course, this is a most important prize for Africa. Even more so, he's Nigerian. We've got to celebrate every single huge achievement by one of our own. But here it is. It's been given by the Tel Aviv University of a country that has actually destroyed 70-80% of the university in Gaza. I'm going to give you 2 minutes on that because, so we can answer some calls if you guys want to call. Go ahead.
So I would say to that, right? I agree that we need to celebrate our own. That's very important to me as well. But there have been people who have received awards who have said thank you and refused the award for so reason, or others, like, precedents, or others who have taken the award, gone up to the podium, and then made a mention. For me, that is very important because one thing moving forward, right? We have to understand that, okay, we are accepting an award from someone. If it comes at the cost of our voice or our freedom of speech, then what does the award really mean? And do I really want that award? And what kind of example am I giving to my fellow Ghanaians or Africans? That, you know, and I think these are all very, you know, important questions. And of course, I don't believe in generalizing, right, for everybody, but I know that resistance can take many, many, many forms, whether it's something to do with your country. But what I'm sure of is we've seen it again and again and again. When your award comes at the price of my freedom and my dignity, and my freedom of expression is part of that freedom and dignity, then what does it really mean?
Indeed, what does it mean? So let's talk. We've only got the 5 minutes left or so. Western institutions and the politics of silence. So when the genocide in Gaza began, major museums like MoMA, the Tate, and the Guggenheim said nothing for months. Meanwhile, artists like Emily Jacquier, Tanya El Khoury, and even you have used your platforms to speak out. What does the silence or selective mourning of these institutions reveal about the political economy of global art? And can trust ever be rebuilt?
The silence is damning. The silence is complicity. If we go by, my friend, the expert in governments, follow the money trail, you'll find that the money is a lot of the connection, it's interconnected. So, you know, where is the funding coming from for these institutions? Who controls the purse strings and who controls the direction? Who controls what artists we should raise, what artists we shouldn't, who we should platform, who we shouldn't? It's become, again, this is a generalization, right? You have the organizations and the groups who are doing things alternatively and who are speaking out against this, right? But the mainstream, these big institutions are pretty much part of that system, you know, which is embracing fascism, is involved in the industrial military complex. You have a lot of money laundering. You have a lot of, like, I'm also an art curator, and I'm one of the founders of the Beyond Collective, which is an NGO in Ghana for artists, you know, and I've been in the art world for a long time. And so this is, you know, that silence is complicit. It's as simple as that. Especially when it comes to these big institutions. And so many of the names are the same, you know, or you can trace the connections.
Indeed. So before you go, I can't let you go without asking you, how's the new administration doing in Ghana?
They're doing well. I hope, you know, again, it's still very early to say. I think the change was very needed because there was a sense of huge malaise that kept growing. I don't think it's gone away. Of course, Ghana is not in a vacuum. We're pretty much affected also by Gaza, by everything that is happening it affects shipping lines, it affects the economic structure of the country. So there is an economic crisis, you know, after COVID, like all of the issues that happened and got exacerbated after COVID are still, but you get a sense of, in general, again, of relief, but also very cautious hope. And but again, I would say it's cautious because people have been burnt and people, you know, are not, to start with, we had so many inequalities. Again, these post-colonial systems of economic systems, right? Don't make it easy to, part of it is creating inequality and conflict, you know? And I think that after COVID, gradually, these inequalities are deepening. The global crisis, you know, is deepening all the problems as well. But we're cautiously hopeful because it's terrible in one way. Let's see what happens with Gaza and with Iran. It's insane. And that would affect the whole world. I don't know, like people are cautious, I would say. They're cautiously hopeful.
But we hear that your new president is doing relatively well.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is.
That your economy is getting better, stronger.
So the CD has appreciated, by quite a percentage since he came back into office.
What did he do? Before we go, if I could just interrupt you because we've got like a minute left. What did he do that brought the CD up? What do you think he did?
He did several things, but one of them is establishing, I think it's called the BOD or whatever, the gold, a body that basically prevents gold from being smuggled out of the country. So I think that played a role.
So that brought the revenue back into the country.
Hopefully, yes.
Right.
Yes. Right. I mean, in terms of revenue, general revenue and purchasing power, right? I don't have a sense that people's purchasing power has started increasing again. Like that. I'm talking about the majority, like the population, right? Yeah. So that appreciation of the money hasn't dealt with the
inflation yet. It hasn't
inflation yet.
Right. Okay.
Yes, and all of these things. So that's why I'm saying, like, there has been a lot of positive things, right? And people are cautiously hopeful, but you have elements like that, which is still like we don't know, but it takes time.
It takes time.
Rania
Odaymat, thank you so much. Multidisciplinary artist, art coach, and creative. Thank you so much for joining us on board.
Thank you too, and it's my pleasure.
Take care.
All the best.
Wonderful weekend, you too. Bye bye.
You too. Bye bye.
Listening to your number one station for talk.
99.3 Nigeria Info.
99.3 Nigeria Info. 99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.